Welcome, everybody. Today I've got President James Coleman, who is president of the state senate here in Colorado. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, David. Really appreciate the opportunity.
So tell us, what was it that caused you to run for office? I mean, the first thing that ever pulled you into politics thing, not the most recent.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, first and foremost, what pointed me in the direction of running for office was my upbringing. So I'm a man of faith. I'm now, of course, as an adult, a husband, a father. But the reason for me running for office was community as well as my upbringing. I met my dad when I was 11. My dad was a street preacher, is a street preacher still. He's 88. Had me when he was 50. So when I met my dad at 11, he was 61. As we met later on in life. And his idea of a good time in that age was going to soup kitchens and nursing homes and food pantries serving the homeless. And as an 11-year-old kid, David, I'm thinking, what are we doing? I thought this was going to be going to the park,
Right.
going to the movies. And so I wanted to spend time with my dad so bad that I said, all right, whatever you want to do. So I've been conditioned my whole life serving people. And when it came to running for office, I got a call from community to say, hey, we need you to do this. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And like, when you care about people, you care about the issues, we'll help with the process. And so we knocked the doors. We went to the town halls. We built a platform. We talked about the things we thought were most important. We heard from folks in our community. And here we are 8 years later. And now I'm in my last term is in the Senate of a first to 4-year term.
So that first time you ran, what were the driving issues to you?
Biggest issue for me has always been education. I don't like bullies. And so I, in school, would fight bullies when I saw somebody getting picked on. And that turned into me getting kicked out of school. And so I got kicked out of public school in 6th grade. I was at Smiley Middle School in Park Hill. The only alternative for me was a juvenile program or a private school. I could not afford a private school, but I was blessed to get a scholarship to go to a school that taught Black history. My first Black teacher, the principal was a Black woman, and it was a school in Park Hill, not too far from where I grew up and where my other school was. And so because I had that opportunity, it really made an impact in my life. Many other things too, but that was a big part. And so then I went from there to high school, college, came back home, and I decided to pay it forward. And in part, paying it forward was running for office to fight for education, to make sure all of our children have access to high-performing schools, that our schools are fully funded, that they have access to a number of schools that fit their need, whatever choice that might be. And so that's a big part of what I focused on in my first campaign was education and what we ran on.
So this is off topic a little bit. You said that Black history class was giant for you. Was there any one or two people in that Black history that really spoke to you, so to speak, or whatever?
The main person that spoke to me was former Mayor Wellington Webb. Wellington Webb actually was mayor at the time when I was in that class in 7th grade. And he walked into my classroom, larger than life. He still is, 6'5" or whatever. And he said, I'm the mayor of Denver, and I represent over 500,000 people. And I didn't know what that meant. I was blown away. I didn't know we could be the mayor. I didn't know that African Americans who had been in elected office prior to him were in elected office. I wasn't involved civically in that way. And so he was my Obama. He was my Obama moment. And that's one person who inspired me when it comes to Black history, that is living history, Colorado history. And we always, some of our national African American leaders, we always talk about Dr. King and we talked about Rosa Parks. And that's great, but I want to know who from Denver, from my community, where I grew up. So Wellington Webb, still have conversations with him periodically, and it's a blessing to have him and so many others who have served that motivated me to run for office.
Okay. All right, so let's say you come into office this Monday morning, and you've got both the majority and minority leadership there from the House, your opposite number in the Senate, and Governor Polis there, and they've all said, you have done such a great job, you get to give them one bill and they'll just ram it through. It will pass. What's the bill?
I'll tell you, it'd be one of the bills that I'm running right now. Look, I have a bill that I'm working on. It's not fully fleshed out, but it is addressing a problem. And that's the point that I try to make to people. The solution might not be the solution you want, But do we agree there's a problem? And the problem is that we have 123,000 students in Colorado that are in zip codes that we call education deserts that do not have a high performing spot, a high performing school for them to attend. And we just revised the school finance formula. We're looking to implement that this year and turn that on. We also eliminated the negative factor, this deficit we used to pay off every year before we could fund education to a level that is still under where it needs to be funded. And even after all that, David, the question I have is, what about those kids too? And so my bill, in short order, has a community mechanism by which teachers, students, and parents can make a proposal to their local school district within that zip code on a fix to their not having a spot for a high-performing seat, a high-performing school, or a new option. And the fix can be allocation of funds to lower-income neighborhoods that can't raise through the parent-teacher or PTA, PTO, $100,000 by parents. And that money goes to after-school care programs and so on and so forth, tutoring. The other half of this is new, and new would be we want an authorized by our district charter school or a magnet school or an innovation school or zone, or that we want a comprehensive school that is traditional but ultimately all district authorized. Or we would have the CSI come in and authorize a charter school in that district. And again, all at the will of the people who are being impacted in that zip code. So that's what I wish we could get done. But I will say it's not so much the how that I wish we could get done, it's the what. I wish we could eliminate the education, the academic achievement gap and the lack of access to high-performing schools. Every one of our kids should have a high-performing school in their neighborhood, and if they choose to go to a school outside of their neighborhood that maybe provides a different opportunity like arts programs, then why can't they do that? And I want that for my children, and I'm fighting for that for my children, but in my position, I have a responsibility to fight for that reality for all children.
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong on this. It's a fundamental thing we face. I remember Bill Gates talking about this once, where he said it should be a simple thing to say what's required to have a high-performing school. It's not. To a large degree, still, everyone's struggling with it. Is the concept behind this is each group is going to come up with what they think may be the magic thing. No one's probably going to find a magic thing that works everywhere, but they can find the magic thing that makes a difference for them.
That is correct. It's not a statewide policy that everybody must implement. It is a policy that creates options for families and teachers that they actually have to trigger in order to make it happen, specific to their zip code. So you might have zip codes that say, I don't want that. I want this, or we don't want any change at all. That's fine. But they don't have a mechanism outside of voting for elected members, which is a great mechanism. They don't have a mechanism outside of that to say, here's how we want to participate in proposing a solution to making sure we have a high-performing school for our kids to have a great education.
All right. All right, so outside of schools, and I think schools is actually the number one answer to this, what else can we do to provide equal opportunity to everybody in Colorado?
I think that's another great question. Again, education, having an equal playing field, starting off strong. I think in addition to that, I had an opportunity to go to Switzerland a year or so ago with the governor and a delegation. And when we went there because Switzerland has a 0% dropout rate from high school, David. They have a 95% transition into the workforce. So this goes back to your question. I want everybody to have a career where they can make more than they need in order to afford to live and really be thriving and working in their passion. So I think that that's really important. And so we worked on a policy last year that's being implemented, but we want to look at how we credential versus just look at higher ed. A lot of our folks in our state have multiple years of experience in a field, but they may not have a degree.
Right.
And the degree, or the lack thereof, prohibits them from being able to maybe work in a profession. And so we're looking at how we mirror credentials with education in order for you to have that career of your choosing. I would love for everybody in the state of Colorado to have access to affordable housing and overall affordability And if you have a great job that pays you your value, your worth, more than a minimum wage, livable wage, then you can do that. You can afford to have a home. You can afford to afford basic needs and groceries when you go to the grocery store. Safety is really critical for us in Colorado. We want to make sure that everyone feels safe in their communities, and so we work on policy to do that. So I think education, economic opportunity, affordability and housing and other areas, safety, these are all critical areas. The one that's really important to us universally, though, is healthcare. Everybody should be able to get access to healthcare when they need it. It should be accessible and affordable. So ideally, in Colorado, these are the things that I think are really important to success. When you have all these things, there are things that you're able to then focus on outside of those bare necessities. And I'll wrap up on this, David, by saying this, that when COVID hit, it showed you what was necessity. COVID showed you that if you get sick, you should have access to proper health care. If you didn't, then you might lose your job because you can't go to work. You lose your job, you lose your house because you can't afford to pay, right? It's a trickle-down kind of compounding effect. And so that's why I say healthcare as well is really important for everyone in the state of Colorado.
Okay. I know housing's a giant crisis in California. How big an issue is it here? Is it more that you're getting out in front to not let it get too large, or we already got quite a bit of a problem on housing?
I think we have a really big problem with housing. And part of the reason is that we have to distinguish, David, between owning a home and renting. So housing is both, right? It's one or the other. There's other options for housing, but let's just take those two examples. I think what's really a concern outside of rent prices going up and cost of living is not being able to afford housing. And when we talk about housing, we always talk about single-family residence. I'm also talking about multifamily residence. And we talked about not being able to affordable housing in that sense due to some of the concerns we have around construction defects, which is why I'm working on a bill that not everybody's going to agree on. Is a tough issue, but is an area where you can create home ownership. So if you want to rent, man, that's great, right? But if you want to build wealth, it's very hard to do that in purchasing a single family home that can cost you upwards of $600,000 a year. And that's just in Denver. And so for me, I'm working on that policy because housing is a concern, but in particular, ownership is a concern. I want other people to be able to have access to housing the way that I do, to build wealth, to leverage that, to be able to afford to live, to pass that on to my children, And so that's something that's really important to me when it comes to housing.
All right. New question, and you've been around long enough, you remember back. We were a red state and then a purple state where it was boom, 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 and then suddenly, boom, we almost magically flipped into the strong blue state. Do you see a way that the Republicans in an election or two could flip it back to purple or even red, where they run the statewide offices and get a majority in the legislature?
I would say yes. It's always a possibility. And I would be foolish to say otherwise. Because I was here when in the House, at the time when I was in the House, we controlled the House as Democrats, but the Republicans controlled the Senate. This very office that I'm sitting in right now is the Senate President's office. I remember coming to Senate President Kevin Grantham's office to share concerns about my policies not moving forward once they came from the House to the Senate. And so I do think that's a very real reality because I was just there when I first got elected 8 years ago. And so I do, though, believe that Colorado's a beacon of hope for the rest of the country when you look at the recent election. I believe that's because our democratic values are inclusive, regardless of your political affiliation. So you may care about certain rights, let's say LGBTQ rights or reproductive health. These are issues that sometimes we get opposition from, our Republican colleagues from, but there are other things where we align on, and we have to find where those things are that we align on that keeps us inclusive as leaders in this space as Democrats. We work across the aisle because the issues impacting metro areas are equally impacting rural areas of our state. We know in Colorado, we align more than we dissent. The majority of our bills are passed with bipartisan support. And as Senate President, one of my values is to foster collaboration among my colleagues of all political affiliation in both chambers. And that's also to encourage healthy, constructive discourse in support of finding solutions to problems. Because we have that mindset, because we have that leadership style, I believe that we can keep and grow our numbers, but it's only because we are inclusive as a party.
It's, it's interesting how it flipped a lot faster than, demographics and immigration would say. So I think you got a very good point there that a large part of it is what the Democrats by and large spoke to. And I think a lot of the Republicans helped you also with what they spoke to.
You're not lying, man. I mean, I think people are looking at the issues, but they're also looking at leadership. I have a television on in my office, and it's streaming news all day. I don't keep the volume on, but like if I pop over and look really quickly, I'm looking to see whether or not we're going to have a government shutdown type of deal, right? And I think that people are like, what? What are you talking about? And I think when they look at who's in leadership in D.C. or here in Colorado, they're looking to see really if there's a place for them in our state. They care about individual issues. They may have certain priorities, but overall, they just want to know if we're governing professionally and responsibly in a way where we can agree to disagree, but not play games, not filibuster, not call each other out and not be negative and use foul language or be on social media. And when you look at the TV, that's what you see. And so I think a lot of people come our way because we've been in a majority and they see, even if they're independent, that they would vote in support of a Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate and in the governor's office and across the board because they don't see us acting unprofessionally. And I got to say, I don't want to speak negatively of anyone, but I will just speak from my chamber. I love my chamber. And I love my Democratic and Republican colleagues. We work well together. I'll say this last thing real quick, David, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I got to give a shout out to Paul Lundeen, Senator, our minority leader. When I was nominated for Senate President, I was nominated by my majority leader, Robert Rodriguez, but the minority leader seconded the nomination.
That's nice.
That doesn't happen everywhere.
Yeah.
And that means that they're willing to work with me as a leader to support the entire chamber and not just one party. And I think when you see that outside of this building, how we work together, when you come into the building and visit and you see us working together, it gives you hope. Yeah, we disagree, that's fine, but at least we can work together to find solutions to common problems.
All right, so now that you've said all those good things, how does Trump and Musk impact all of this? And your answer must include that you guys will see us through, at least in Colorado, for the next 4 years of insanity.
Well, David, I will start off with that response. We will see you through here in Colorado these next 4 years. Look, I have this thing called the Coleman way, right? And it's how I lead my members now. I just spoke with you a little bit about it. But ultimately, it's collaboration. It's bipartisanship. It's actively listening to understand, to find practical solutions to problems we all agree on. So in terms of what I'm seeing in D.C., like him or not, what I believe Trump is doing, if anything positive, is making people more politically active. People are paying attention, like on every side of the political spectrum. Politics is better when more people are active and engaged in the work. And we've seen an increased amount of protests right outside the window here at the Capitol, long committee hearings where constituents from across the state make their voices heard, Coloradans reaching out to my office every day with their questions and concerns. Trump's campaign and election have also helped spark a shift, I think, in the Democratic Party to recruit new, younger candidates to get involved and run for office. We just had the Young Invincibles here today. Shout out to them. They were advocating for Senate Bill 1, which is our Voting Rights Act. Right? And so, they're here too. Our democracy is stronger when we have a greater diversity of voices and perspectives, whether it's local, state, federal level. And I think it's exciting to see a new generation of Democrats inspired to get involved and help our party move forward in this second Trump administration. And so just in summation, I'd say President Trump has clearly tapped into people's very real and present fears about being able to provide for their families, build a good life, achieve the American dream, the things that we just talked about, David. And he's shown all of us, quite frankly, Republicans and Democrats alike, that we have more work to do to listen to the American people, to hear their needs, and find solutions to improve their lives.
All right, last question for you. What do you see as the 1 to 3 giant challenges for Colorado over the next 20 years?
I think the most challenging issues, those 1 to 3, again, is access to high quality education, that all Coloradans have access to affordable health care. And what I said earlier about affordability, just to make Colorado a place for everyone, especially helping the least of these afford a place to call home and secure a meaningful, fruitful career, education, healthcare, and affordability.
Okay. Do you have any closing thoughts or whatever you'd like to say to everybody watching this?
As corny as it sounds, y'all, I just want you to know that we love you. We value you. We don't just say that. We hear from you. We engage with you. We come to community, but we encourage you to come here to the Capitol. This is your house. I wasn't in this building as a visitor until I was 25. I was born and raised in Park Hill, up the street. And then when I finally came into the building and I found out laws were being made and billions of dollars are being allocated, I wanted to know how those things were benefiting me. You should want to know how that's benefiting you. Come down and get engaged. And talk is good. You got to have conversations. You got to understand one another. Communication is critical. But my Bible teaches me faith without works is dead. So we can have a good conversation, but what action are we putting behind it? And I am a licensed and ordained minister, so forgive me. But I'm a politician and a preacher. So, what I'm rooted in faith is a big part of why I do this job. And if I believe what I believe, then I can't just talk a good game. I have to put action behind my words. And so I just want to commit to you all that we are committed to doing the work, and not just during legislative session, but in community, throughout the interim, as we're engaging in community, preparing for 2020. We will make it through this. We have made it through tougher times. And I'm just committed to helping anyone that reaches out. So feel free to reach out to our office. Find us on social media. Find us online at colemanforcolorado.com. Email us at colemanforcolorado@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you. I appreciate you, David. Thanks for the platform, man.
Thank you. You have a good day.
You too.